Haribol, Namaste. Welcome. My name is Janapati Das, and this is the Bhagavad Gita class as it is. We are reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is translated by my spiritual grandfather, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who I offer my respectful obeisances to. We've been reading through this for the last few months, and we will continue to read through, discuss, and read the purports by His Divine Grace. At this moment, I'd like to offer my respects to you. Thank you for tuning in. And let me take the moment to offer my most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, Jagaguru Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, and pray for his unlimited and unconditional mercy upon me. Thank you. We will start with some chanting. So please join along. Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prasayate Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gora Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Prasayate Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaurabhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaurabhakta Vrinda Haribo Nitai Gaur Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaur Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaur Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaur Haribo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Om Ganana Tamiran Daisha Gana Jana Shalakaya Chaksha Militam Yanatashma Shikura Venamaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, so continuing. We had left off last time with text 55 in chapter 2, entitled The Contents of the Gita Summarized. And we've been reading very interesting unfolding of the philosophy that Sri Krishna is imparting to his friend and now disciple, Arjuna. And Prince Arjuna, who is also actually really a spiritual entity, just like every Krishna is in his original form as Sri Krishna. Krishna's body is always spiritual, it's never material. Whereas the Jivatma is true nature as Jivatma, as a spirit soul, is spiritual energy, non-different in quality to Sri Krishna. However, the body is not, although an energy, an external energy, material energy emanating from Krishna, it is not our true identity. It is it's a hankara. It is our false ego. It that enables us to think that this material energy is somehow us. And this is the dilemma that's facing. It's basically the truth that unveils a complete change of mindset. Whereas most people in the material world act on a material platform thinking, I am this body, I'm this age, I'm this sex, I am this, this is my sexual identity, this is my race. All these things are designations of the material energy which makes up our body, the chemicals, the pigment of our skin, the influences of our mind. So the mind itself is also material energy, a subtle material energy. And so Krishna is explaining to this idea that, which is a very drastic and amazing philosophy. It's pretty shocking because I remember there was, my godbrother had done this documentary where they went out in England and they were interviewing people. Who are you? And people were saying all kinds of things, well, giving their name, their occupation, even like their sort of psychological makeup or whatever. And the interviewer kept trying to go deeper. No, if you could put all the designations of the body and the mind, who are you? Who are you? And it was really, really hard for people to fathom who is the seer, who is the person experiencing everything going on, because we are so conditioned by the idea that this is me, this is me, this designation is me. And Arjuna had also fallen into the trap thinking this is me and this is my relatives and they're on the battlefield and I am about to go kill the relatives. So Krishna is unveiling this truth about the living entity and the relationship, the occupation that the living entity should be engaging in, and more to come, right? So we are reading from text 56. Dukshe anu devigna manaha. Shukeshu vigatasraha. Vitaragabaya krodaha. Stita dir munir uchyate. Dukeshu, in the threefold miseries. Anu devigna manaha, without being agitated in mind. So manaha, right, is mind. And that's actually the word mantra comes from that sort of word. Manaha means the mind, and tra means to lift above or to draw away from. So the spiritual sound vibrations, or the mantra is a spiritual sound vibration which draws the mind away from material energy and places it at the feet of Sri Krishna. Shukeshu, in happiness. Vigata sraha, without being too interested. Vita, free from. Raga, attachment. Bhaya, fear. Krodjaha, anger. Sthita dihi, one who is steady. Muni, sage. Uchate is called. So this is some really very interesting words in Sanskrit that are sort of foreshadowing a lot of things that are going to get discussed, including attachment, fear, and anger, which we'll get into a verse later on about the idea of lust, and from contemplating the objects of the senses, one that develops attachment, and from attachment comes we'll get to the verse, but basically it leads to anger. So these things are foreshadowing what's going to be brought up in later on. I think chapter 3 or 4. So kroja, anger. Sthita dihi, one who is steady. So this is a very interesting word in Sanskrit, and we'll get into what Bhaktivedanta Swami has, because I was studying this a little bit and realized some major connections. Muni, sage, uchate is called. When one who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries, who is not elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called the sage of steady mind. Yeah, so remember that. We'll come back to that verse again. Purport. The word muni means one who can agitate his mind in various ways for mental speculation without coming to a factual conclusion. It's really interesting because muni has the word mind, mana, which has to do with mind. And you think, well, Narada Muni, why does this particular translation mean that a person who can agitate his mind in various ways for mental speculation without coming to a factual conclusion? That sounds about like a lot of philosophers. They just like, I remember this very much from thinking about, like, before I came into meditation, I've always been very curious and sort of like wanted to study things and read things, and so I remember being in that kind of, it was sort of like, not to be so crude, kind of mental masturbation, because people would just like, as a philosopher, you're like, well, it could be this, it could be that, it might be this, it might be that. Oh, yeah, what about this? Have you ever considered this? And this is kind of what philosophers do. They sit around, they discuss, what might be, what's the possibilities of what might be from your mental speculation. So this is quite an agitation, because you never really, you try to come to a conclusion, a consideration or a conclusion about what is the absolute truth, but you can't do that with your mind, because there's always your mind going, but what about this? But what about that? What about this? What about that? So it's very, very wonderful to know the absolute truth and hear it from a bona fide representative of Krishna who is telling the absolute truth, who's saying you can apply this absolute truth in your life and you can see the results of this absolute truth, which is really wonderful, because you try so many things and all you can do actually is kind of fool yourself into believing that because it's my philosophy, I'm happy with it. But we know we're not, because your mind's always like, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And there's never really a conclusive answer. So it is said that every Muni has a different angle of vision, and unless a Muni differs from other Munis, he cannot be called a Muni in the strict sense of the term. Nashu Munir Yasha Matam Na Binam. But the Sthita di Muni, as mentioned herein by the Lord. So we have those two words that actually Bhaktivedanta separated as one who is steady, Sthita di, and Muni, sage, as a sage, right? So it's very interesting, because when you put those words together, then the Muni is the true strict sense of the Muni. That's the Narada Muni. Ashtita D Muni, as mentioned herein by the Lord, is different from an ordinary Muni. The Shtita D Muni is always in Krishna consciousness, for he's exhausted all his business of creative speculation. I love that. I love how Bhaktivedanta puts phrases. It's like he has exhausted all his business of creative speculation. So that's like, okay, we've done spinning around, and just like going around and around in circles. And then here's the conclusion, It's like, oh, Krishna consciousness. That's really what it is. But this is very interesting. We have this word shtita, which means one who is steady. D is also one who has insight. That's the word in Sanskrit, that was one who has actually vision, wisdom, spiritual insight. And it's also in the word that we came earlier when we said, as the embodied soul continually passes in this life from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death. In the self-realized soul, or the dhiras, the sober man, is not bewildered by such a change. So with dhira has a D in their DHI, which means one who has insight and one who has vision. And when you put that together, they're steady. They have the spiritual vision, and they are using, their mind is fixed. The Muni is the one who uses their mind. Normally, in the case of like mental speculation, right, in the material world, but in spiritual life, because they are Shrita Di, they are one point focused on Krishna, then they're therefore the Muni. They are truly a Muni. As mentioned herein by the Lord, is different from an ordinary Muni. The Shtita Di Muni is always in Krishna consciousness, for he's exhausted all his business of creative speculation. Arjuna could have easily been a Muni, and in the material sense, and then Krishna was like, okay, stop speculating about these things. Here's the absolute truth. He has surpassed the stage of mental speculations and have come to the conclusion that Lord Sri Krishna, or Vasudeva, is everything. He is called a Muni fixed in mind. There we go. Shtita Di Muni. A Muni fixed in mind. Such a fully Krishna conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries, for he accepts all miseries as the mercy of the Lord, thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to his past misdeeds, and he sees that his miseries, by the grace of the Lord, are minimized to the lowest. So when we surrender our mind, it's not that like all bad things stop happening, but we don't allow our mind to be like, oh my God, look at that. What's going to do about that? What are you going to do about that? We just like control the mind, and we put our mind in proximation, or is that the right word? In the nearby the chanting of Krishna's names to calm the mind down. We give the mind activities to do other than to figure out how to be a materialist in this world, right? So this is Sthita Di Muni, a person who is fixing their mind, who is engaging their mind in the service of Krishna, because we will see later on the more verses that are brought up that Arjuna's like, well, it's very difficult to try to control the mind. It's like controlling the wind. It's easier to control the wind than it is to control your mind. But Krishna's saying you can do this if you apply it in the right places, right? So the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. That's what's said. If you let the mind go wild, you let the mind be the king, you let the mind disturb the situation, let it just run wild with whatever, goes on, then of course it's going to torment you, and it's not going to be fixed. It's going to be jumping around the monkey mind, which is what it does, which is why we have this very easy process of hearing and chanting Krishna's names. We can focus our mind, we can focus our ear, we can focus our thoughts on pictures of Krishna, on japa meditation, on Gauranga breathing, on the kirtan, on focusing on scripture, so many things, but especially the chanting of Krishna's names, which cleanses the heart of all the dust. So the heart being covered makes us believe that we are this body, we are this mind, we are every designation, right? So that the clearing of the mirror of the heart, where the living entity is present, where we are present, can be cleansed by the activity that's been given to us by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a sacrifice for this day. So this is a wonderful verse and purport, and something great to meditate upon. And it's why Bhakti Vinod Thakur had said, I don't know, it's not Bhakti Vinod, it was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. He said, you should beat your mind 100 times with a shoe in the morning, and again, of course I'm paraphrasing, but again at night, another 100 times, because you're constantly having to keep your mind down. The mind is like, well, what about that? Wait a minute, hold on. I don't know if I'll do that. It's like, because it's used to being king, right? It's used to telling you, it always gives you the worst advice to do, what to do. Oh, she looks good. Why don't you go after her? Okay, I'll go over to her, and you're like, oh my God, I don't like her at all. You find she doesn't satisfy you. She's like crazy. I don't know, the mind's like, you just blew it. Why did you go with her? You should actually go with her, So the mind is constantly being redirected around. And Maya Devi makes this so that we can, do what we want, which is why we're in the material world, until we get to the point of like, okay, all right, I've been kicked around enough times, I want to find out the absolute truth. And this ties back into this whole idea of karma kanda. When a person is following the karma kanda and they want to have sense gratification, then eventually they have to come to a point of realizing that the just engaging in gross materialism is not the way to go. It's not going to bring you any happy or satisfaction. But if you focus your life and you focus your heart and you focus your intention and your mind on the service of Krishna, just like it says here, so the miseries, by the grace of the Lord, are minimized to the lowest. So you can deal with the situations as they happen, right? It's not like the miseries stop or anything like that, or even if they're not really severe. Death is very severe. A lot of things that we deal with are severe, but we're able to tolerate it because we understand, we have a spiritual perspective, okay? So the spiritual perspective is that I've done things in the past that brought me here. I've done really bad things karmically, and the actions I've taken in life have caused suffering to other people. Therefore, I am receiving this as a mercy from Krishna that I may burn off this karma. But the ultimate burning off of karma comes from the serving of your spiritual master in Krishna by chanting Krishna's name. So that's very wonderful. Similarly, when he is happy, he gives credit to the Lord, thinking himself unworthy of the happiness. He realizes that it is due only to the Lord's grace that he is in such a comfortable condition and able to render better service to the Lord. So there again, the consciousness is different, right? You get things karmically for that, but we think of it as the grace of the Lord because everything comes from the Lord as mercy and grace, and so when good things happen, we're not like, oh yay, good things are happening. Wow, we know it's gonna be passing, but we're appreciative and grateful to our spiritual master for giving us, to making things, because we don't deserve it. I mean, really, if we really think about the things that we've done in our past life, we don't really know, but we can imagine. We've probably been in every situation. We've done the things that we go on the news and we gawk at, and we're like, oh my God, what a horrible person to do that. We've done that too. We've done it. We've done it all. We've been murderers and rapists and the worst people in previous lives. So we're so absolutely fortunate and unworthy to actually come into contact with the spiritual master as our dear Srila Prabhupada, to help guide us out of here. It's wonderful. And for the service of the Lord, he is always daring and active and is not influenced by attachment or aversion. So that's the sober person. He's like that seesaw analogy I was saying. They're not like, woo, or yeah. They're just like one point focused. They're sthita di muni. Their mind is focused. What can I do if it's a bad situation materially? What can I do to serve my spiritual master in Krishna? If it's a good situation materially, what can I do to serve my spiritual master in Krishna? Always that. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. How can I serve Krishna? Attachment means accepting things for one's own sense gratification, and detachment is the absence of such sensual attachment. The one fixed in Krishna consciousness has neither attachment nor detachment because his life is dedicated in the service of the Lord. Consequently, he is not at all angry when his attempts are unsuccessful. A Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination, one-pointed focused. And this is the point that goes back to what Krishna was telling, just offer this service to me without attachment for the results, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Just do your duty. Text 57. Ya Sharvra Tana Trana Bishnehash Tatat Rapa Shubha Shubham Nabi Nandati Nadaveshti Tasha Prajana Pratishtita. Ya, one who, Sarvatra, everywhere, Anabhishneya, without affection, Tat, that, Prapaya, achieving, Shubhya, good, Ashubhya, evil, Na, never, Abhinantadi, dati, praise, Na, never, Deveshti, envies, Tasha, his, Prajna, perfect knowledge, Prashtitya, fixed. Translation, one who is without attachment, who does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor laments when he obtains evil, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So there we go, that summarizes basically what we were talking about before. Not attachment, don't be attached to the good or the bad, and that is the absolute truth of understanding knowledge. Engage in your service for Krishna in loving affection. There is always some upheaval in the material world, which may be good or evil. Yeah, we see that all the time. Like clockwork, there's good things, there's bad things that happen. And even like you may be like looking at something and you think it's like a good thing, and it's really not, maybe a bad thing for another country. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. So, why is this world so terrible? It's just like, the people are like always like, why can't we have this, and why can't we have that, and why can't we live in peace, and why can't we live in harmony? Even if we were to live in peace with other humans, there's still dualities that go on. You have to kill living entities to eat, to drink, to get places. You're constantly doing actions that could cause suffering and unhappiness to everyone. And so the world is full of duality. There's good and there's evil. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is the all-good absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position called technically samadhi. There it is, really nice. And that's why a lot of times there is a tendency to be hyper-focused in political discourse and discussion about, what's good, what's evil, what do we do about this situation, what do we do about Ukraine and Russia, what do we do about Israel and Palestine, what do we do about the homeless people in America, what do we do about, it's like that. And you can get, so integrated into that kind of thinking. You read the news about that all the time. You study about that all the time. You you engage in that, and you really have very little influence, if any, over such situations, because everything is dictated by the material energy and Krishna. But it's more about Krishna. It's the root of the tree. So engaging in the service of Krishna by engaging in the process of sadhana bhakti, 1, and 2, teaching people about Krishna and the philosophies and tenets when necessary about not being the body and not being the soul, and that you can only really find happiness to re-engage your loving service in Krishna consciousness, or God consciousness. A lot of times people may not be in a place to understand that God has multiple names, and so if it's Allah or Jehovah, God consciousness, it's like that's a good standard. So text 58, Yada samharyate chayam kurmo ganiva sarvasya indriyani dli yarte bayash tasya pragya pratishtita. Yada, when, samharate, winds up, cha, also, ayam, all these, kurma, tortoise. Kurma is also the name of the tortoise incarnation of Krishna, which is a tortoise. Angani, limbs. Iva, like, sharvashya, altogether. Indriyani, senses. Indra arte baya, from the sense objects. Tasya, his. Prajna, consciousness. Prashtita, fixed up. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws his limbs within the shell is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. So, very nice, very poetic verse about the tortoise is on this huge shell, right? And so if they see a predator coming, they can draw their limbs into their shell and protect themselves, right? So this is a form of Ashtanga that is also known as I'm going to double check it, but I think I believe it's Dhyana or Dharana, one of the two, when you withdraw your senses from different external sense objects. It might even be Pratyahara, but I'll look that up and confirm that and put it in the comments. Another point I want to make, that my mind is screwed up, so it's like I will make wrong comments sometimes, and I try to check those things. Like last time I made a comment about Rupa Goswami and mixing him up with Haridas Thakur, and I get words mixed up, and that's just kind of what happens. So feel free, if you see something, hear something, and you're like, well, that's not quite right, I know this is that, please put it in the comment section. That's okay, and correct me. That's fine. I always do need to be corrected, and it's a wonderful, humbling situations for me. But I will, if I catch something, then I will put it in the comments as the correct answer. So the purport: the test of a yogi, devotee, or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servant of the senses and thus directed by the dictation of the senses. So we have the word godas. And godas means, the das means the servant of, and go is the senses, right? So we have Goswami, who is the master of the senses, right? So Goswami, like Rupa Goswami. So Rupa Goswami was the master of his senses. He was focused on, but most of us are godas, where the senses are in control. We see something we want to eat, we grab that, or we see something attractive, we want to do that. We want to listen to this. So but the devotee of Krishna is Goswami. He's able to be master of his senses by focusing his mind and his senses in the service of Krishna. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. The senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. Yes. It's like, you have this, if you go, in the Krishna book or something, and you see the what was it? Kaliya snake. His Kaliya snake was like, had all these venomous heads and was like, and Krishna was just jumping on him, kicking him down. It's a beautiful analogy of this idea that, you surrender to Krishna. Krishna will put those senses down, control those senses, control your mind. Every time it wants to come up, he kicks it down. And it was dancing on it beautifully, like he was a dancer, Very wonderful story, Kaliya serpent. And at the end, Kaliya surrendered to Krishna, That's the thing, Krishna will kick him into place, and then till we surrender it. Okay, we give it up. Because they're venomous, they destroy things. I mean, the Kaliya serpent was poisoning the waters. He was killing the trees. He was endangering the residents of Vrindavan. Our mind and our senses can be our worst enemy, and not only that, but other people's enemy as well. I think of like just how people act and what they do and how much destruction they ensue by having complete no control over their senses or mind. They're like this poisonous, they say poisonous things to other people. They hurt people with their words. They want to like bite them and kill them with their venom from their mind. They do things, they shout out things, they hear things that are not helpful and not about Krishna. They see things that are not helpful, and so they're using these things in a way that's not effective, but destructive. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. So the yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots, and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. The best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise that can at any moment wind up his senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purposes. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna-conscious persons are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is an example set by the analogy of the tortoise who keeps the senses within. Excuse me. Very nice. Text 59. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina. Niraharasya dehina. Rashavarjam rashopi asya. Param drishva nivartate. Vishaya, objects for sense enjoyment. Vinivartante, are practiced to be refrained from. Niraharasya, by negative restrictions. Dehina, for the embodied. Rashavarjam, giving up the taste. Rasha, sense of enjoyment. Api, although there is. Asya, his. Param, far superior things. Dristva, by experiencing. Nivartate, ceases from. Translation. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So this is a really amazing verse as well, because it's saying this is the idea of like the renunciate, the vision in Arjuna's head that he was just going to go off and try to withdraw his senses on his own and not engage in any kind of battle. And this is like the person, the so-called renunciate, which is kind of what people visualize. It's like, I'm giving up all kinds of things. I'm not gonna eat. I'm not gonna drink. I'm not gonna take care of my body. I'm just gonna, meditate without even really understanding what meditation means. Meditation means putting your life, putting all of your energy, everything you have in the service of Krishna. That's real meditation. So you could be like Arjuna fighting a battle. He's meditating. He was actually in true meditation. So what Krishna is saying is that, you can be restricted from sense enjoyment. In other words, you could be out in the forest meditating without any food or, just a loincloth, and you're withdrawing all those things. You're renouncing all those things, but in your mind, in the mind is like, oh, food, a banquet, your mind is just like tormenting you, right? So all these things in your mind. In fact, my Srila Prabhupada had a cartoon. There was a funny cartoon that was exactly in one of his booklets about that the yogi, and then everybody was looking at the yogi, and he was, and they're like, oh, he's very renounced. He's a true yogi. And in his mind, he's got like the thought bubble is like girls, and he's thinking about like food. So, these desires, the desires that go on in your mind, they'll still be there, but you need something. You can't just push them out. Like, they think in Buddhism, like a null and void, right? Not thinking of anything, or just watching the thoughts go by, and it's whatever. You actually need to do something or engage in activities that give you a higher taste than what's going on in your mind, and that's Krishna consciousness. That's the chanting of Krishna's names gives you a higher taste to be able to be like, okay, I don't really want to do that thing that my mind keeps telling me, because the mind will keep reeling things in and running things down. It's like sewage-laden river in your mind, right? And you're just like, but you don't have to be like, oh, yay, look at there's a TV in the water. I'm going to go jump in there and get in the water and pull out that. So you don't have to, like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm going to think about that for a while. But, no, I'm going to just pick up my beads and, I'm just going to chant Krishna's names. And then you're just like, oh, yeah, that's better. Purport. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Yeah, it's kind of like, when you're trying to diet or something like that, or you're just like, you can't really eat that, and it's like, you need to have like enough reasoning to not, and willpower to not want to eat that. There are certain kinds of foods that I don't like, and I've cut them out really well, but it's still there, and I'm like, God, that's good. I catch myself like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be eating this, So similarly, if you're like a patient, some kind of patient with some kind of disease, and you can't eat these kinds of foods, whether it's meat, you have like cardiovascular, there are people who can never the doctor says you need to go on a vegan diet, or you need to stop eating meat, stop drinking. No way. They are so attached to it. They even try. They have no taste for these other things. They think about it and they just give in. They'd rather just die happy, as they would say. I remember seeing that, what was it? It was called, it was a movie about, a documentary about juicing. Maybe you know which one I'm talking about. It's, I'll have to think about that one. But if you know the name, it's a documentary about this guy who was a juicer, and he was really sick, and he started juicing, and he healed himself, and he went on this crusade to teach other people about juicing, right? And so one of the times he was trying to convince in a truck stop, because I think he used to be a trucker, or he met a trucker who also became a juicing guy and lost a bunch of weight. and was like, this was me, and I changed my diet to this juice. And the guy was like, what? It's like, no way. I'd rather eat this meat and drink beer and eat, greasy food, because at least I'll die happy. At least he thought that, He was so attached to his tongue, he just was like, oh, I'll die happy. But he wasn't happy. He was like way overweight. He was sick. He had diabetes. He was like, he was going to die a really painful and unpleasant death. But in his mind, he thought, I'm better off, because it's too hard for me to just quit all these things and go through this kind of initial suffering stage of like not having the things you like, right? So people are very attached to things that they eat. Similarly, sense restrictions by some spiritual processes like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharyan, Dhyana, etc. is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Let the dead bury the dead, as Jesus said. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. Excuse me. But such restrictions are only good if one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. So really nice, And there we have the Ashtanga yoga system that I was talking about. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharyan, Dhyana, Samadhi. Let's see. Come to the picture. See where we're at here. Okay, one more verse. Text 60. Yatato hiapi kanteya purushaya shrasya vipashichita chitaha indriyani prama tithini haranti prashabam mana yatataha. While endeavoring, he is certainly api, in spite of, kanteya, O son of Kunti, purushasha, of the man, vivashchita, chita, full of discriminating knowledge. Interesting word. Indrayani, the senses. Pramantini, stimulated. Haranti, throws forcefully. Prashabam, by force. Manaha, the mind. Translation. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Pretty amazing. Senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So the senses are... We know how hard the senses are, right? You need a higher taste to control your senses. You can't just be like, I'm going to stop eating, I'm going to stop doing this, I'm going to stop listening. It's like you are so... And then you have your mind in there going, no, this is great, let's keep doing those things. There are many learned sages, philosophers, and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. It can happen so easily. Even to somebody who's been chanting, it can, you just like, your mind tells you something, you grab onto it and you do it, and before you know, you're going down that rabbit hole. You're like, oh my God, what did I have done? And you're just like, you're thinking about it all the time. The mind is constantly playing it out and whatnot. So yeah, it's like wind. Even a person who's trying to control these things, it's like the wind is so strong, blows it away. Because there were stories in the different stories of different great sages who were focused on, and their austerities were creating problems. So the demigod sent down these heavenly, beautiful women to dance in front of them, and and then one person, he lost it. He was just like fell down from his meditation because I think he was doing an austerity, and it was causing, fire was coming out of his head, all these kind of like austere like yoga practices that we don't follow anymore, but people could be able to stimulate their chi in such a powerful way. Like Hiranyakashipu was like that. He was so powerful, he was able to keep the chi in his bones, and an anthill formed around him and ate all the skin off of his body and the muscle. All he was bones. He was keeping himself alive by circulating his chi in the bones. And then Lord Brahma had to come and be like, okay, this is a little crazy. Okay, he's causing problems. He was also emitting such a great heat from his meditation that it was disturbing the demigods as well. So there are many learned sages, philosophers, and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses. But in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Here we go. Here's the person. Even Vishvamrita, the great sage and perfect yogi, was misled by Manaka into sex enjoyment. Although the yogi was endeavoring for sense control with severe types of penances and yoga practice. And of course, there are so many instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is very difficult to control the mind and the senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot cease such material engagements. A practical example is given by Sri Yamanujacharya, the great saint and devotee, who says, "Since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna, and I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor. Whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it, and I spit at the thought." So pretty. All right. Krishna consciousness is such a transcendentally nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man has satisfied his hunger by a sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Yeah, my spiritual master is likened coming into spiritual life as entering into a great banquet hall after you've been starving, and you're just like looking at this amazing spread of, and you have to just kind of like take a little at a time, but you have all this, you can just keep eating from it, and nourish yourself from it. This is what the Bhagavad Gita is like. It's just ever revealing banquet hall of great spiritual knowledge. Maharaj Ambarisha also conquered a great yogi, Durvasha Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. That's the story in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I think we'll stop there, because it keeps going on, but we're at about 55 minutes here. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Have a great day. Namaste.